to what happened last night. My goodness, the most one-sided Champions League final ever from such a dominant PSG who came through to beat Inter Milan 5-0, Cass. I mean, we've been talking about it all morning since we've got in, both waxing lyrical about this PSG side. Give us your sort of initial thoughts on it.
My first thought was Luis Enrique, because it was a manager that I watched manage Spain in Qatar. Me and you chatted. We did shows in there in Qatar. We talked about the style of play that they had, which was very much sideways and backwards with the Spanish team.
Yeah, possession based, but doing very little with it.
Yeah, and it's completely different. Yeah. And whether he's had a rethink as a manager, I mean, you always have to remember that he was part of the Barcelona setup, which was always attacking. When you got in certain situations and you played with purpose, there wasn't sideways and backwards all the time, but you kept the ball. But this team is just... I mean, I had chatted with Andy Townsend before the game, and he said, what do you think? And I said, I can't see beyond PSG. I said, they're just such a gifted team. I said, they're better in every position. I said, but that doesn't mean Inter can't win. I said, but someone's got to, a conversation with that. And Andy was like same. He said, I fancy him strongly. And I'm not saying he's trying to be clever after the event, but this is how we're having a conversation. And we all knew, do you know what? It's the game that everybody, I say everybody, but a lot of people thought PSG are way better. Mm-hmm. You look at Mkhitaryan in midfield, and you look at Vitinha at PSG, and Neves, and the fullback Ekime was just phenomenal last night. Just his relentless run. I mean, he's playing everywhere. Centre forward, left wing, but he always seemed to have energy. You look at that compared to DiMarco, that was up against it from minute one, wasn't he, DiMarco? Was found it. Doué was literally on him, going at him. Yeah. And do you know what? They got a few breaks as well, PSG. The deflected goal.
Yes, that's
things
true.
work for them as well, but they literally overrun Inter in every position of the pitch.
It's interesting because obviously yesterday we were talking, building up to it with Dean Saunders, and naturally when you think about an Italian team, the first instinct is always defensive solidity, which we were expecting from Inter Milan, but my goodness, yesterday it felt as though they lost all composure, completely out of shape as a defensive unit.
Yeah. And to be honest, they're not a typical Italian team that defended like the Jose's did and won games. If you look at their goals against column and the Barcelona ties, this team weren't going to keep a clean sheet.
Yeah, that is true.
If you look at the way they... but I felt, and we had this conversation after the Barcelona threw it away. They, it wasn't okay. Inter got a late goal and in the San Siro and how it all panned out, but Barca really did throw it away, the tie. And both legs, they made massive mistakes in the way they played. PSG, I tell you what I do think, honestly, Nat, and this is a bigger picture, I think that game last night is going to redefine, and it's been happening anyway, with the way that forwards' expectations of work rate, because if you look at Kvaratskhelia and you look at Dembele and you look at Doué, their work rate was phenomenal. PSG, and there's a bigger picture here, PSG fans had a real disdain for their team at times, and it was when the era was when it was sort of Icardi, Neymar, Mbappe, Lionel Messi later on, where they lost the ball, they didn't get back to try and fight and keep it. I mean, Kvaratskhelia last night, now it was ridiculous. He was like playing like a defender, and he's one of the most gifted players on the planet.
But also, all of them were like the Duracell bunny.
Oh, absolutely.
They would not stop.
Relentless.
They were fantastic. And then the players they brought on, I mean, some of the stories, obviously, that we've been learning about these younger players, Mayulu, for example, who scored that fifth goal. I mean, the joy in him scoring that fifth and the way he celebrated will be long remembered, I'm sure. What's also fascinating about PSG, and we've had a message in here, and it's absolutely right to point it out, PSG won, but on the way to the final, they lost to Arsenal. They lost to Aston Villa. They lost to Liverpool. Absolutely right. And actually, if you look at their first 5 games of the league phase, they only won 1. And we were speaking with a L'Equipe journalist, Eric Bilderman, yesterday, and we were saying there was one point where it looked like they might even be heading out of the competition before the sort of knockout rounds. And it was that Man City result where they turned it around to win, and that sort of changed everything. And I was saying it was a 2024 that was very different to how this 2025 occurred for PSG. a real turnaround in quite incredible circumstances when you consider some of those defeats that they have had on the way.
Well, I've seen over the last few months, I've seen the L'Equipe and what has been written about PSG, and there were defining moments where the manager. Remember, they have the break. It's called Le Treve, the break, which is
the Christmas.
Yeah, the Christmas period, and then there was loads of meetings that were going on with players about, and Dembele was one of them, about things that were happening and.
Interesting.
Questioning their, and he'd got loads of goals, but there was things that were going on of how this team has to change their mentality. And look, what we've witnessed is a team that a manager has a massive impact in during the course of a season, recognised what was wrong, then made big decisions because some of them were left out. Mm-hmm. And Cascarino coming in was a big one. Changed it because he's a 60, 75 million euro player, came in, lifted the whole club, and then he runs around like a madman to defend for the team. And well, we can do it. And they had that era and that. PSG fans really didn't like their team at times, or certain players of their team, because they used to think they're great players who are earning money, they're showing off, they've been all the typical stereotype footballers who earn all this money and showing off their Ferraris and all this. And by the way, this team, there's none of that. It's all about what they do on the pitch. And I look, Marseille fans last night, it was their worst nightmare that PSG have won the Champions League. But to win it in the style and probably change, I think this is a defining moment where it's going to change football slightly, where the emphasis, and it's happened before, Liverpool have had these front threes, Man United had forward lines where it literally worked their socks off to close you down. It's going to go back to that. It's going to be forward lines. You are not going to lose the ball and then not backtrack and help out your defenders.
Yeah, I mean, look, this is a final we're going to continue to talk about throughout because it was just absolutely fabulous. For something that was so one-sided, I just found it intriguing and brilliant to watch. Inter Milan fans will think very differently this morning, but something that I think it was Andy Brassel, who was part of our team yesterday, mentioned, I think sums them up. Amorphous is what he said, which is a term that you describe as something that doesn't have a defined shape in that PSG. So because they were so fluid, and you're talking about the forward line, they were all over the place.
They kept switching PSG as well.
Absolutely. They were just so exciting to watch. And the celebration scenes, I do realise there was obviously also some rioting and clashes with police, so not something we obviously want to celebrate in that sense, but the pure euphoria from that victory was wonderful to see. And that tifo that they unveiled afterwards with Luis Enrique and his daughter, who sadly passed away in 2019, Zana, where they were kitted out with the PSG. She had the PSG kit on, didn't she, with the PSG flag. What was it? Harking back to the day when Barcelona won against Juventus, and she put the flag, when she was alive, put the flag in the pitch to mark that success. And that was just a lovely moment. Really lovely moment.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's been an emotional time because the assistant as well, he lost his wife earlier this season, unfortunately to illness. So an emotional victory as well for many of those involved in PSG.
talkSPORT Breakfast, waking you up Monday to Friday morning from 6 a.m. on AM, on DAB, via the talkSPORT app and on your smart speaker. talkSPORT.